Alright everyone, it's time to start off today talking about MSNBC's deep-seated bigotry and racism. Well, technically not racism, you're more talking about ethnicity here, but the two often get confused and intertwined, especially with regards to people who are Hispanic now. I recall years ago, leftists jumped down my throat at one point for talking about white Hispanics. Used to be they considered that a racial epithet. No, they're either white or they're Hispanic. Hispanic is a race. These days, post explicitly Zimmerman trial, with Trayvon, he was a white man, but he was also Hispanic, so they had to start using this moniker because it was a big story and they wanted to paint him as a Klans member, which is clearly not the case, although he did make a series of stupid mistakes after the trial and now he's disappeared effectively from the limelight. When we look at the moniker, yes, you can be a white Hispanic. Yes, you can be a black Hispanic. Hispanic is an ethnicity, it's not a race. Two people from Japan, for example, fully ethnically Japanese. They decide to go to Mexico. They have a child in Mexico. The child is fully ethnically Japanese. That is, they would be considered Asian if you looked at them. But they grow up learning mainly Spanish, and they're eating tacos and shit and have a Mexican accent, basically. They're from the Yucatan or something, Mexico City. And so they are Hispanic. They are an Asian Hispanic. Yes, there are a few of them that do exist. A couple of Germans decide to have a child in Argentina 100 years ago. The Argentinian offspring, their lineage is Hispanic, but they are also very white. They're pure Germanic, the blonde hair and blue eyes and shit like that. Yeah, there are plenty of white Hispanics. But this particular tweet makes it sound like there's something wrong with them. This is an opinion piece, but MSNBC did decide to actually editorialize and post this, so it's on them for posting in the first place. Link in the description, archived of course, but I'll read it verbatim for you. White Latinos need to stop equating their experiences with those of black and indigenous Latinos. Now, I've already talked about the myth of indigenousness. In the context of the New World, the fact that your ancestors walked across the Bering Land Bridge instead of sailing to what became the Americas, the various countries, it doesn't make you special. The fact that they came a little bit earlier by a different method is meaningless. I don't see the point in saying, well, yeah, 95% of the entirety of the North and South American continents were wandered through and sporadically even utilized. Most people were migratory and didn't even have sedentary structures that they built of any means. And then, people came in and filled in the largely empty space, and they're considered to be a bunch of terrible invaders. Meanwhile, the wonderful people that came across the Bering, for some racial reason, right, MSNBC, they were so much more peaceful and totally never did intertribal warfare. And by the way, they're all the same. They're all indigenous, despite the fact that those tribes fucking hated each other half the time. It wasn't really until European expansion began that those tribes ever conducted any sane diplomacy, because beforehand, without any outside impetus, they're just slaughtering one another, often over a sacred rock or something like that. I hate to tell you, but the noble savage mythology from the Romantic period has been totally revived by the woke left. They don't even realize that their bullshit is like an Americana boomerism, like American Eagle thing. And from that also dates back to the 1800s. Well, these people may be savages, but behold how much better it is out in the wilderness with the braves running around with the deers and all of that buttery nonsense. Here I am in this city. And it's usually some artsy-fartsy dude who's painting stuff. He's like, look at all the coal smog, the sound of the roaring trains. I fucking hate this. I'm going out west to be with the Injuns. It's basically wokeness in a nutshell, by the way. Anyway, the idea that somebody has a lighter color of skin, but they are of the same ethnicity, they're potentially living in the same area, but they have totally different experiences is hilarious. Then why is Hispanic always considered singularly for all statistical purposes, MSNBC? You want them to be one thing for categorical purposes when we're talking about crime or income or poverty, the lack of income, or anything like that. But all of a sudden they get parsed apart when they're talking about personal experiences. See, it's MSNBC's way of trying to erase their individualism. Why are they doing this now? Well, it's quite clear. Hispanics as a voting bloc 10 years ago were exceptionally left-wing. they have moved well in the other direction. In some parts of the country, they're beginning to abandon, for example, the Democratic Party, and they ain't joining the neocons. They appear to be joining populism. They are becoming, oddly enough, MAGA. Supposedly, Trump fucking hates people from Mexico, and yet it seems like an overwhelming plurality of them, not a majority, but a significant minority, and far more than in the past, even with a Mexican Mitt. You'll remember when he pretended to be Hispanic. Talk about pandering. That time on Telemundo where he spray painted himself orange. Yeah, Trump does that every single day, supposedly. He does it better. That's why it worked. All of a sudden, you've got a near double-digit pickup over the course of a couple of elections. Well, of course, the legacy media is goddamn terrified of this. This is why they invented the CRT-derived concept of BIPOC. The idea that a person from Ghana and a person from Indonesia have similar experiences simply because of the color of their skin. Their individuality is meaningless. Their ancestry is meaningless. Their language is meaningless. Their former nationality, their new nationality, everything about them is meaningless except for the amount of melanin in their skin. That's it. That's what they want them to focus on. Why? Because then you can create voting blocks. That's the only reason. For example, if you were to have a white voting bloc in the United States, especially if it were to account for white Hispanics, it would be by far the dominant voting bloc. It'd be about 70% of the U.S. population. Between white non-Hispanics, white Hispanics, and people of mixed race that are 3/4 white or more, if they were to form a voting bloc and say, you know, to hell with all this shit, we're voting self-interest, we're tired of the id poll, and we're just going to purge the commies, and we're going to legally entitle ourselves to do so by taking over the entire system, they would be unstoppable. By democratic means, they would have formed a construct capable of doing so. This is something that the legacy media doesn't want because they're likely to adopt a more populistic system of economics. Legacy media doesn't want competitors. Their corporate sponsors don't want competitors. The Uniparty doesn't want competitors. You'll notice that the Democratic Party is still overwhelmingly white dudes, by the way. Just so you know, there's a difference between the people that vote for them and the people that represent the voters. It's actually it's very interesting. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is gobbling down Hispanics left and right. This is being warned of by the liberal powers that be because they're not becoming John McCainite neocons. They didn't want Mitt Romney. They want Donald Trump. And that's what pisses them off the most. There are times their language towards, for instance, black conservatives, it runs really, really close to being like Uncle Tom and references and shit like that. In fact, sometimes that's literally the reference. I'm just waiting until they have similar references for white Latinos, white Hispanics. It's only a matter of time. It's like Hispanic people have overwhelmingly rejected the use of the term Latinx because they're like, no, I'm either a Latino or a Latino. We've been saying it that way forever. You're a white liberal trying to get me to say it. I'm actually Hispanic. Why don't you go fuck yourself? They've begun to ignore the white, college-gated community liberal construct. And that's, again, why it's so goddamn funny. I'm enjoying it. This current political zeitgeist has its benefits. Yeah, the banking sector might collapse, another Great Depression, World War III, but at least, in the absence of mean tweets, at least we have crazy shit like this. That's about all. Peace out.